Good evening, everybody. My name is Tim Cassidy, and I'm an interpretive naturalist. I've been a naturalist for many years, and in 1996, I was hired by the Indiana Department of Natural Resources to work as assistant naturalist at Lake Monroe at Paintown State Recreation Area. How many folks have been down there? Excellent. Well, I started in 96, and it was a very fateful year, and I'll go ahead and tell you a story about it. Now, if you remember in 1996, that was the year of the Great Flood down at Lake Monroe. They weren't able to let the water flow out of Lake Monroe, so the Corps of Engineers had to hold all the water that came down in the spring and summer, and it came within half an inch of flowing over the spillway. And so a 10,000 some acre lake became 15,000 acres. And a lot of strange things happened, and some wonderful things happened, and a lot of growing up happened. And I cut my teeth there as an assistant naturalist, and I got to know some very good folks and some great friends. And what we did is, since Paintown was flooded, the Nature Center was an island. And we had to boat out to the Nature Center every day. And we lost over half of the campground spaces because, again, we were flooded. So we had to go out in the mornings, what we called dawn patrol, and we would go out in a long john boat, about 10 foot, aluminum boat, and someone would look around for water hazards. Now you might ask what a water hazard is. Well, we're talking about picnic tables, garbage dumpsters, small cars, things that got caught in the waters as they rose real high. And we would rope those up, and then we would pull them back to shore and get them out where someone wouldn't boat by and hit them by accident. So I usually came on around 7 o'clock. A friend of mine named Stip was there at 6 o'clock, and another friend of mine named Lurch was a security guard. He was there all night and usually quit around 7. And we would meet up for dawn patrol, and we'd hop in the john boat, and Stip would go ahead and drive us out and around the lake. And we'd look around and just make sure everything in the area was safe. And we'd make notes of things like where we saw beavers chewing on trees and such. And one morning, as the fog was just burning off the lake, sun was up, we had a little sip of coffee in our hands, and we were just tooling around, when we saw, or at least I saw, this large wake coming right at us in the boat. And Stip saw it too because he cut the motor. And as I saw this wake, and that is where the water is parting, coming right at us, I reached out and I tugged Lurch's shirt because he was in the front. And I said, "Lurch," and I just pointed. And he turned around and we looked. And as that wake got closer, we could see a fin of a fish, 2 feet tall, sticking out of the water. And I'll tell you, folks, the closer it got, we could see in the brown, muddy waters of the lake that it was a catfish. The biggest catfish we ever saw. Now, we've heard about Whiskers, the big catfish is supposed to be out in Monroe, but you don't know exactly how true the stories are. But in this case, we saw a massive fish. And we didn't know what to say or do. And so we watched this fish come right at us, swam right underneath our boat. That fin scraped the bottom of our boat, and we all turned to look over the other edge to watch it delve off into the deeps. But that's when the tail came up and smacked our boat and knocked it right over, and we fell, well, at least I fell out of the boat into the water head first. And Lurch and Stip, they both stayed and hung on. And when the boat righted itself, they were still in it. But I was in the water. I can swim, so I came up and I was treading water, and I swam over to the boat. And Stip and Lurch were picking me up and trying to get me in the boat. And just as they started to get me in the boat, I saw their faces go sheer white. And next thing you know, I felt this clamp on both of my legs, and I was almost jerked out of their hands. That catfish had swallowed my legs all the way up to my knees. Now, folks, Lurch and Stip are big men. I'm only, at that time I was 5'2", and Stip was about 5'6", 5'7", And Lurch is 6'9". That's why we called him Lurch. And they had about 400 pounds of weight between them and me trying to pull. But what happened next was a dead heat because the fish got hold of me and they got hold of me, and it was a tug of war back and forth, and I was the prize. And I'll tell you, I was yelling, "Pull me in! Pull me in!" And they were doing their darndest to get me in that boat. Of course, Whiskers, as we know are going to call that catfish, was doing its darndest to pull me back in. Now, if you don't know anything about catfish, especially big flathead catfish, they have a trick that they'll do to pull their prey into the water if they're catching something out of the water. And that's what happened next. Because I felt my body wrench around and my body twisted in that mouth, and I realized it was going into a death spiral. Just like you see crocodiles on the Discovery Channel, ripping the meat off those antelope. That's exactly what started happening, and I said, "Let me go!" And Stip and Lurch let me go. I went whoosh, right down into that water. Now I figured I had about 2 minutes of air time, 2 minutes, to get myself out before I drowned. And I thought about what I had to do. Now, I know how to protect myself from bears, and I understand you're supposed to hit the snout of sharks, but how do you fight off a giant catfish trying to swallow you? So I started beating on that catfish's nose as hard as I could as we sank down in the water. Nothing. No avail. It didn't even act it. So I tried to reach out, and I looked for those eyes, and I tried to gouge those eyes so I could get it to spit me out. I couldn't reach those eyes, and I couldn't see anything. It was so dark and muddy and silty under there. And as I was flailing around, trying to figure out what to do, I grabbed a whisker. And as soon as I grabbed that whisker, that catfish started shaking me like anything. And I grabbed and I pulled that whisker, and that catfish started going in circles under the water. And it began trying to beat me on the bottom of the lake, and silt and mud was coming up everywhere. And I grabbed that whisker with both hands, and I pulled it as hard as I could because I knew I was doing something right. And I got desperate because I could feel I was losing my air. And so I bit that whisker as hard as I could. I bit that whisker right in two. And that catfish went, and it spit me out. And I went swooping up through the water, and I had no idea if I was going up or down because I couldn't tell. And I began swimming as hard as I can. And my lungs were aching, and my arms were so sore. And I didn't know if I made it to the surface or where I was when I blacked out. Now, I woke up. As you can see, I'm alive. I woke up when my head hit the bottom of the aluminum John boat because I popped out of the water like a cork out of a champagne bottle. And then Stip ran the boat right over to me, and Lurch picked me up out of the water, all 5'2" of me, and threw me in the boat. And that's when I woke up. So I was laying there, and I was coughing and spitting water, and Lurch shoots me in my side, says, "Come on, Tim, you're not going out of my shift. Come on, Tim, wake up. You'll be fine, Tim." And I had water in my lungs, and I was coughing it out, and, well, I was breathing. But in my gasping voice, this is the first words I said. I said, "Gentlemen, we need to get a bigger boat." And with that, I would like to thank Whiskers for all it did for me because I went in the water 5'2", but now I'm 5'4". Thank you.